Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome along to this LinkedIn Live with me, Justin York. This afternoon, we're going to be talking about how your data culture is not necessarily what your policy says. Because what leaders tolerate becomes your data culture. The things that they allow to happen and continue to allow to happen will be the things that people do. They won't be doing what's written down in your policy. I think it's a reasonable assumption that most organizations want better data. They want data that they can trust and have confidence in. They want clearer accountability. They want to use consistent definitions and much greater transparency. But at the same time, they also want to move faster, improve decision making, and make better use of tooling such as AI. But your data culture is not created in the words of your strategy, your operating model, policies, frameworks. It's created by the behaviors that leaders encourage. They don't challenge, they ignore, or quietly accept. So it's not defined by what your leaders say is important. It is defined by what they repeatedly tolerate. That's when those behaviors become normalized. You may have seen some of these more familiar examples. Things like that report that consistently or continually gets quickly adjusted before it goes in front of the meeting. Or maybe it's different teams using different definitions for the same term. For example, I always talk about bi-weekly, which can mean twice a week, or it can mean once every 2 weeks. Depending on how it's used and who's using it, depends on what the definition of that should be and what people's understanding should be. We might find that data owners exist, but they're in name only. They exist in a RACI matrix. They've got a role description and all those types of things, but actually they're not doing anything. They're passive. They are not making decisions. They're not allocating resources. They are not getting blockers removed. And that means that the data stewards fall into what I call the data stewardship trap, because they have all the responsibility and all the workload, but they have no authority to get anything fixed or done. You may find the same issues keep reoccurring. They're discussed repeatedly in forums, but nothing ever happens. There's no remediation, there's no plan, there's no accountability, there's nobody taking ownership of those things. Teams will be bypassing the approved processes. All sorts of reasons for doing that we'll come on to. Poor data quality is just accepted because that's the way it always is. Somebody's decided that's good enough, and so that's fine, but we don't challenge those things. And the person that raises any concerns or any challenges about these types of things gets more challenges in return than the issue that they are raising. Now, they may look like isolated operational issues, but they're not. These things will be happening in a much wider sense across most large organizations. But over time, they will become the accepted way of working. So we move from workaround to operating model. Even though we've got all those approved processes sitting in the background, people will not be using those. They'll be using the things that work for them. Now, there's a pattern to these things. An urgent problem may occur, and somebody says, oh, we need to get this number fixed. We need to get this thing sorted out. And so somebody runs around and gets it fixed. A workaround has been created. And people realize that that workaround has actually fixed the issue. We've got it done. We got it done much quicker than we might have done if we were using the official process, escalating it, getting somebody to look at it, somebody to own it, somebody to make a decision. And because nobody challenges the underlying causes, other people begin using it. So there's more and more people using this workaround. And finally, eventually, the organization comes to depend on it. It's not an authorized process. It's just something that they come to depend on because the job gets done. So that exception can very quickly become your operating model. And if you have a whole load of undocumented things that are your operating model, then you could be having more risk or generating more risk in the background. Now, people create workarounds for entirely understandable reasons. The official processes may be too slow. They may not affect operational reality any longer. Teams may also be overloaded. They're trying to do so much more with less, but they're having to do it quicker. So we have all these pressures to deliver. So it's not the workaround that's the problem in and of itself. It's evidence that a gap exists somewhere in the official process, somewhere in the data ecosystem. So that's all well and good. We create all these workarounds and bits and pieces. But what we often find is that people will learn from how leaders act. So if a leader pops their head around the door and shouts, "Is that report ready yet?" Or maybe they say, "Why are you raising this issue now?" There'll be other things that they might say. But what those things do is they are telling the people that are doing the work what works, what doesn't. So what we often get is the fact that leaders, when they're asking those types of things, without asking any more detailed questions, are in effect saying, "I favor speed over quality." Now, that's all well and good, provided that the data is of good quality when it's being used. Because we're saying now that deadlines matter more than all of that trust and confidence in the data. We're saying that raising concerns creates unwanted attention for the person that is raising that issue. And we don't want that. As people who are doing work, already working very hard, the last thing you need is more attention on you. We also find out that fixing the cause would be great, but fixing the number in the here and now is much more important. And we might be finding that ownership can be avoided because, I mean, if you have to go and ask owners and find owners and get decisions and allocate resource and that kind of stuff, that takes forever. But the boss wants that thing doing now. The idea that data governance becomes optional when you're under pressure. Lots of things could become optional when you're under pressure, but it's these types of ideas that people are conveying because they want things done now. I want it done now. I want the result today. I want the report fixing. I need this. I need that. All these ad hoc things that come in create all these pressures. However, if leaders ask better questions, a different culture will develop. So if leaders are asking or people learn from the better questions, issues should be raised early. It's okay to raise issues. So when somebody's asking and saying, "What's the confidence in this number?" Or they might be saying, "Where did we get this data from?" Or "Have I seen this recurring issue before?" Issues raised early is good. So once people understand that, they will raise them. Uncertainty can be discussed. So if you're not sure of something, it will be okay to raise that issue and have it discussed without getting all the blame and criticism and all that kind of stuff. You will see that owners are making decisions. They're making decisions. They're allocating resources. They're removing blockers. They're supporting data stewards. So they're being active. You might see people saying, leaders saying, "Well, actually, I've seen this about 15 times now. Why have we not fixed the source of this issue? Because that needs to be resolved." And the biggest thing that people will learn is that trusted data is part of good delivery. So rather than running round and trying to fix stuff all the time, trusted data is the thing that we need in order to have good delivery. But those things require psychological safety. You need that space where people feel safe, and leaders have to set that. They have to set that environment. Because if people think that raising an issue is going to lead to blame or criticism, or it'll just be dismissed out of hand, or it might create more work without support again, They will keep their concerns hidden. Why would they raise something that just puts them in front of the spotlight and they get a whole load of criticism and possibly extra work? So what they keep doing is working around it. So the workarounds exist and they continue. And that unofficial operating model keeps working. But leaders can also weaken governance. They don't do it intentionally. It's not something that they set out in the morning to do and say, well, I think this morning, I think I'll go into work and weaken all the governance. They wouldn't be doing that. But because of the pressures they're under, the delivery times are getting shortened because everybody says we can do so much more with less, but we can do it quicker. And then therefore people are, even the leaders are saying, oh, I can get this quicker, I can do this, or I can leave less time to ask for it. So that creates a whole load of pressures. Now, there are 5 things which I think can be particularly damaging in this area. The first one is accepting unexplained numbers. So if a report is presented to a leader, but nobody asks some sensible questions like, where do the numbers come from? Have they been validated? And if they've been validated, who did that? Maybe which definitions have been used? Because if you think about bi-weekly, for example, which definition is being used? Which version of that definition is being used? Who is owning it? Who has the accountability for this particular thing? And possibly which assumptions sit behind it? So what have people assumed? People might have assumed that this has been validated. They may have assumed that the quality of this thing is good. So what are the assumptions that are sitting behind it and where do they come from? So we have to think about acceptance of unexplained numbers. Rewarding heroics. The person that manually fixes the report works till 3 o'clock in the morning so the boss has got it on his desk at 07:30 or whatever it is praised for the efforts that they're putting in. And it's right that they should be praised for the efforts they're putting in, but they shouldn't be having to put the efforts in the first place, because that underlying issue, while they've done all that work, will remain because we've not looked at the root cause. We haven't looked at where did that issue actually come from. So the organisation is celebrating the heroes or the heroines, but preserves the conditions for that issue or issues to remain. We might be allowing passive ownership. We might be letting it ride, the fact that people, owners go to data governance forums, but they don't actually do anything. They talk a lot, but they just, oh, we'll look at that next time, or we'll look at that next time. But they're not making decisions. They're not taking accountability. They're not saying, I'll allocate resource to get that fixed. They're not doing any of that. And so you don't see the improvement. And people, it's a funny thing about people, because if you don't get any feedback that says, do you know what? They fixed that, somebody removed that blocker, that's brilliant. If you don't get any of that, and you just see things flowing along in just the same way, then you'll stop raising issues, which is not what we want people to do. Or maybe they'll be treating data governance as something that the data team should be doing, which they shouldn't. The data team can still be setting up standards and make sure the systems are there and everything is running, the data is where it's supposed to be, and all that kind of great stuff. But the business still owns its own definitions, its decisions, its priorities and risks, and it owns all the resources. So it should be deciding these things. It's not up to the data team or the data governance team to own those things. And sometimes leaders do not respond well when they are challenged, when a decision is challenged. You see this a lot. Leaders will often react quite badly when they are challenged. So you sometimes find that concerns are just dismissed out of hand. People ignore them. You might get some criticism, some negative feedback. So people stop raising the concerns. Those issues don't go away. They don't go away at all. They just become less visible. But what also can be happening is the fact that the risks in the background are rising, because if the issues are not visible and you're not addressing those issues, then you will not be addressing the risks that come with them. But then how is this a business problem? So what? Tolerated behavior leads to a number of things. Repeated remediation, the same issue getting fixed over and over and over again. Whether that takes till 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever, it's not really relevant. The fact is that it's getting fixed over and over and over again. And each time that is done, there is time wasted. Add all that time up and you might find that there's quite a lot of time, and therefore by definition quite a lot of value that goes with that. That might mean that we've got slower reporting because we're having to fix stuff and things are not the right quality, so we're having to triple check things and do all sorts of things. But that leads to slower reporting, and all of that kind of stuff leads to weaker decisions, because when we don't understand the ecosystem or where the data comes from and what's happened to it and who's validated it and who owns it, what decisions have been taken, we are guessing. We're not making decisions, we're guessing. We are making decisions, but we're basing them on more guesswork than we are evidence. You might find conflicting management information, because you may find a couple of reports that are trying to report the same number, but the numbers are different. And if they're coming from the same source, then the numbers should be the same. So we need to know how they're calculated. Where did the information come from? We won't have clear accountability. And when we don't have clear accountability, we run into this problem with escalation of issues. We run into this problem of getting blockers removed and issues resolved. We might be more exposed to the regulators, because if we knowingly produce or present some information that is not accurate, when the regulators find out, it's not a huge surprise to know that they're not very happy about it. All of these sorts of things lead to frustrated data owners and data stewards. You've got the frustrated data owners, some of them who will be doing great work, some who are just being passive, not doing anything. But you've got the data stewards in the data stewardship trap with all the responsibility, no authority. So they can't even fix things. And therefore, we can have delays in initiatives, in transformations that are undergoing. And we might have increased risk, such as AI, because when we have the garbage in, garbage out scenario, that's a well-known sort of thing. But if we have AI and we're putting garbage in, we'll get garbage out, but it will be on steroids. Everything will be amplified. You'll find out about a lot more things a lot quicker. And that's when it becomes important to understand criticality and that type of stuff. But all these things don't stay inside any particular team. They appear in operational performance, customer outcomes, how fast it takes for a customer to get their order, regulatory confidence and strategic decision making. All of these things get impacted by these types of things that are going on inside the organization. Some of the bigger risks that remain will remain invisible because capable people are manually preventing them from becoming incidents. The heroes and heroines are working very hard. It's the swan scenario. Everything is serene on top of the water, but underneath it's paddling like mad. Well, that's what's happening. And those issues or these risks don't come to the surface. So how does all this link to something like AI, let's say? So you need to be able to answer some basic questions in organizations. You know, the ones I talk about. What have you got? Where is it? How does it move around? Who's using it? What for? Who owns it? What's the quality of it? But for things like AI, we have to extend those things out a little bit. We have to know what data is being used, but in a more granular fashion. We need to know where it came from, because if there's multiple sources, we need to know exactly where it came from, because we need to make sure it's from the definitive source. We need to know who owns it. Yep, we definitely need to know who owns it, and we hope they're an active owner, not a passive one. But is it suitable for the purpose that we're putting it to? So if we've got a number that we're going to put in, then we need to understand that how was it calculated, for example? Where's that number come from? What is the calculation? Is it the right thing we're going to put in? If we're using personally identifiable information, well, should we be doing that? Is it ethically correct for us to put that through our model? We need to know which rules apply, which definitions we're using. We also need to know, how do we escalate issues, but more importantly, how do we do that quickly? And then we need to understand who is accountable for the output from that model, because they are the ones that are going to have to answer to something if it's not Right. But AI is not going to remove unclear ownership, hidden workarounds, or weak data quality. It's not going to do any of that. Those things will still exist. AI might amplify them and make them a lot more visible, but it's not going to remove them. So while AI can and will amplify insight, it can also amplify things like uncertainty, inconsistency, and poor accountability. So there's two sides to this particular coin. The thing is that your AI is going to inherit what already exists in the ecosystem. So if there's a whole load of bad behaviors that have been propping up your ecosystem, workarounds, shortcuts, all that kind of stuff, your AI is just going to inherit them. So what should leaders stop tolerating them? Well, there's lots of things they should stop doing. They should stop just accepting the fact reports can't be explained very well. We should be asking, what's the confidence in those numbers? Where do they come from? If it's a recurring issue, they should be challenging it and saying, hey, we've seen this 15 times. Why is it that we keep getting it? Why is this not being fixed? Who owns these things? Because they need to get onto those people and say, you're not doing your job. The data governance forums or committees that are just talking shops. Critical data without clear accountability, if we know what the critical data is. There will be risks that have no action owners, things that we need to remediate, things that we need to sort out. The data stewards in that trap just being left to solve all the business problems on their own. An AI initiative is progressing without understanding the supporting data ecosystem. It's really important because they need to understand where that data comes from. It's really important that they know that. So the aim is not to blame anybody or remove every workaround. The aim is to say, okay, a workaround exists. Where is the gap that allowed the space for that workaround? Because it's those things that we need to understand. We need to understand where they are, close that gap, and then we can remove the workaround. So if we've got things that they should be challenging or they should stop challenging, then how do they strengthen the culture? Well, we need to get them to start asking, where does the data come from? Is this critical data? If it is, how has it been validated? How has it been checked? We need to make sure that the leaders make sure that the owners are actually making decisions, removing blockers. We need to reward root cause analysis. We need to make sure that we're fixing the things in the root of the problem. We need that psychological safety. We need to make sure that uncertainty is safe to discuss. We have to link any outcomes that we're getting to business outcomes, to business impacts. And we need to check whether the governance is working in practice or whether it's sitting on paper. Because if it's just metaphorically gathering dust in your servers, then it's not doing you any good at all. And then I think we also have to include data readiness in transformation and in AI planning. So leadership is not about knowing every detail. It's about asking the questions that make clear the accountability, the evidence, and the risks. So you might want to, when you go back to your desk, think about some of these questions. Which data problems have become normal? Which workarounds exist that you see that are very rarely challenged? Are people expected to make those decisions? If they're accountable, are they expected to make them? Are they making them? Are we fixing the recurring issues at source, or do we just have those heroes and heroines till 3 o'clock in the morning working around getting that stuff fixed? You might say, which things are currently being rewarded? Because that will tell you whether or not we're thinking about the heroines, etc. But people need to know the purpose of asking these questions, right? Otherwise, if they don't understand, they'll think about blame. They won't be thinking about psychological safety, and they will tell you very, very little. So you really need to understand your data ecosystem. Yeah, you've got policy standards, governance roles and committees and all that kind of stuff. But the challenge is knowing what happens beneath those things, how the data is really moving around. Where are we manually intervening? Where is the ownership passive when it should be active? Where have we got these normalized behaviors that are not the official processes? Where have we got people that are absorbing all this organizational risk? And why is it that governance has not become part of the day job, the everyday thing? And this is exactly why your data ecosystem, the thing that decides whether your data initiatives succeed or stall. So what I keep seeing is that teams don't fail because they pick the wrong tool. Tools are all very good, nothing wrong with the tools, because nobody's mapped the ecosystem before they began, because nobody understood those 6 things that I talk about. By that time that these things surface, you're a long way down the road, you spent a lot of money, and it's never going to work without spending a huge amount more money. So that's what my data ecosystem diagnostic is there to help you prevent. It's just 90 minutes, 2 people, you and I. We map the data ecosystem end to end, and we find out where it's breaking, where are the gaps, what are the pointers that you need to look for. Which ones can you act on, and which ones possibly can you just ignore for another day? You'll get a written summary of your ecosystem and the gaps. So if you're planning something in the next 12 months or so, and it's going to be a brand new thing, then the data ecosystem diagnostic could well be for you. So my final view, my final thought is most people come to work wanting to do a good job. But when the official process doesn't support that, they adapt. They create the shortcuts, the workarounds, and the informal ways of working that gets the job done. Every time a leader accepts those things, an unexplained number, and unresolved issues, all they're doing is reinforcing what really matters, and the people will keep doing that because they will take the path of least resistance. What the leaders tolerate, as I mentioned before, becomes your ecosystem, becomes your data culture. So ask yourselves, what is your organization, what are your leaders currently tolerating that may be weakening trust and accountability and confidence in its data? Because that question will start to give you an insight and a view on what's happening in your organization. I'll just have a quick look at a few comments. Yeah, you're hopefully going, yeah. Thank you about the great value. Good, glad you're enjoying it. It's not going to remove unclear ownership. You're absolutely right. It's not going to do anything like that. AI is never going to do that. We're talking about the people aspects of things there. So that is absolutely right. There should be a clear distinction between the business and data problems. The thing is, you have to have a link between the data and the business issues so that you can drive out the good impacts and outcomes from that. And are we fixing the issues at source? Yeah, well, we always should. We should definitely be doing that. But of course, that takes time and effort, and it's sometimes much quicker just to fix the report yourself. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you for attending me and joining this afternoon. That's brilliant. So why not coming in next week when I'm going to be talking about something new? We're going to be talking about data eras. And which one might you be in? Still all linked to culture, still all linked to this good stuff around ecosystems, but we'll be talking about data eras. So hopefully I'll see you next week and have a fantastic rest of your day.